There are moments when transformation doesn't arrive as enlightenment, but as complete dissolution. Everything you believed yourself to be simply crumbles away. It begins quietly, perhaps with an inexplicable unease or a sudden awareness that your entire existence, your career, relationships, daily patterns, feels hollow and artificial. Then, without warning, the framework that once held your life together starts collapsing. You're not experiencing clinical depression, yet something is profoundly wrong. This transcends simple exhaustion or existential crisis. This isn't about astrological influences or temporary mood shifts. You've entered what Carl Jung identified as the dark night of the soul. Here is the truth rarely spoken aloud. This phase carries profound spiritual significance, though it feels anything but sacred. It resembles death experience while fully alive. While Jung didn't originate this term, which traces back to 16th century mystic Saint John of the Cross, he recognized its psychological necessity. He understood it not as pathology, but as essential passage, a collision with the unconscious that fractures the ego completely. The agony stems from this very fracture. Your ego, that meticulously constructed identity and self-concept, must disintegrate before authentic being can surface. This destruction arrives violently. You might fear insanity approaching, but what is actually dissolving is illusion itself. The spiritual journey reveals its raw underbelly here. There is nothing picturesque, nothing curated, nothing peaceful about it. It manifests as unexplained tears in parking lots, emotional numbness while others appear functional, existential questioning that strips meaning from everything. This represents sacred disintegration preceding profound breakthrough. The most destabilizing aspect is the isolation. In a culture worshipping productivity, image, and certainty, falling apart becomes forbidden. Rather than being recognized as spiritual purification, it gets mislabeled as personal failure, character weakness, or psychological disorder. But consider this possibility. Perhaps this collapse isn't malfunction, but intentional design. Jung believed the soul possesses its own wisdom. When life structures no longer serve inner truth, the soul rebels. Your former ways must burn completely, not as punishment, but to create space for authenticity. If you're currently here, feeling disoriented, disconnected, fundamentally misaligned with everything, understand this. You're not damaged, you're simply in the crucible. And this fire, excruciating as it feels, is refining you. This exploration will reveal what is truly occurring beneath this darkness and why your suffering contains sacred intelligence. For now, simply breathe. You're not isolated in this experience. In fact, you may be closer to your authentic self than ever before. If you're drawn to expanding consciousness and exploring life's deeper dimensions, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom. There is much more to discover. And by this video's conclusion, your understanding of awakening will be forever transformed. Nobody prepares you for this truth. Awakening doesn't commence with illumination. It begins with silence. A silence so profound it consumes every identity you've constructed. You're not merely melancholic or confused. What is happening resembles an internal earthquake. The foundational plates of your identity you've constructed, beliefs, ambitions, and emotional patterns are shifting, fracturing, and reorganizing without your consent. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of achieving wholeness through integrating the shadow, the unconscious, the abandoned aspects of self. But here is the unvarnished reality. Before wholeness arrives, you'll experience complete fragmentation. because encountering your true self requires first releasing the version constructed from fear, approval, seeking, survival instinct, and conformity. Consider this carefully. You were never taught shadow work. You learned politeness, functionality, meeting expectations, but nobody showed you how to grieve the life you thought you should live. So when internal collapse begins, when you no longer resonate with your profession, your social circle, your values, you question your sanity. But what if this isn't dysfunction? What if this is integration? Imagine your psyche has been sustaining a false self, a mask, for years or decades, and now it simply cannot continue. It refuses to, and your soul, quietly yet persistently, is calling you home. But this homecoming initially feels like banishment. Old emotions emerge: grief, anger, guilt, even fear of wasted years pursuing wrong directions. And here is the peculiar part. These feelings might not even connect to present circumstances. They're echoes, buried childhood grief, unprocessed rage, emotional fragments stored in the body, awaiting permission to surface. And now, finally, they're rising, not to torture you, but to liberate you. This is what people misunderstand about spiritual awakening. It is not exclusively about light, love, and elevated frequencies. It is about descent, depth, and encountering the parts you've abandoned in darkness. Jung expressed it perfectly. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This isn't conclusion. This is sacred composting of the obsolete. It is psychic digestion of everything misaligned. Yes, it resembles chaos, but beneath that chaos, something intelligent is unfolding. You're not disintegrating, you're shedding, you're not regressing, you're remembering, you're not failing, you're finally feeling. And that is not weakness, that is healing. Eventually, a point arrives in the dark night where pain becomes familiar. Not improved, not easier, not improved, not easier, just less shocking. You stop asking, when will this end? And start questioning, what is this truly revealing? And that is where the paradox opens. The suffering, confusion, and spiritual exhaustion aren't punishment. It is not karmic retribution. It is not because you're defective. It is happening for something. That something is revelation. This is the great spiritual reversal. Your lowest point can be your truest initiation. This isn't motivational rhetoric. It is metaphysical law. You cannot embody light without reconciling with your darkness. Not superficial reconciliation where you reframe it or journal it away. Real reconciliation, gritty reconciliation. The kind where you sit in your chaos and say, okay, show me. This is what Carl Jung meant by holding the tension of opposites. Light and dark, pain and purpose, suffering and transformation. He understood what most self-help literature omits. The psyche doesn't evolve by avoiding discomfort. It evolves by moving through it consciously. But here is what will challenge your understanding. Once you genuinely feel your pain, truly listen to it. It begins transforming, not because you've solved it, but because you've stopped fleeing from it. There is a quote often attributed to Jung. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, most anxiety, overthinking, even spiritual bypassing serves as cover. A distraction from deeper, cleaner pain we're meant to experience. And when we stop resisting that pain, healing commences. So what is the dark night of the soul? Truly, it is the soul's detoxification of falsehood, removal of spiritual armor, incineration of masks. It is a breakdown engineered by deeper intelligence within you, one declaring you're ready for something authentic. But first, let's remove what isn't. And however harsh this sounds, your suffering is sacred. not because pain is holy, but because of what it reveals. It shows where you've betrayed yourself for acceptance, where you've numbed instead of felt, where you've remained small to feel secure. And in that suffering's clarity, something luminous begins rising. Not enlightenment, not peace, but truth. Clear, brutal, beautiful truth. And truth heals. This is why mystics, psychologists, and trauma therapists express the same understanding in different languages. The wound is the womb. The collapse is the birth canal. The shadow is the doorway to divinity. So if you're hurting deeply spiritually, existentially, don't rush toward fixing it. Sit with it. Question it. Let it speak, because pain isn't the problem. The silence surrounding pain is. And once you stop trying to silence it, once you give it space at your table, something extraordinary occurs. You begin hearing your soul, not the ego, not the voice constantly demanding fixes, checklists, or instant healing. The soul, that quiet whisper beneath everything, gently telling you, let it fall apart. There is something more honest waiting for you. That is rebirth's beginning. But here is where many people stall, right before that moment. When the dark night's pain becomes overwhelming, and it genuinely can feel unbearable, we reach for anything numbing it. Alcohol for sleep, overworking, excessive screen time, overeating, even spiritual practices can become avoidance mechanisms if we're not careful. Another way to dodge sitting with the raw ache of being human. But here is the unglamorous truth. If you numb the pain, you also numb the transformation. Pain is information. It is sacred feedback. It is your soul saying, pay attention. There is something you've been avoiding that wants your love, your awareness, your integration. And if you drown that out with substances, distractions, even positivity, you delay genuine healing. So how do you navigate the dark night without being consumed by it? You slow down, you feel everything. You let yourself break where you've always been brittle. You stop trying to fix your sadness like it is mechanical failure. And instead you hold it with presence, with breath, with fierce compassion. You cry when needed, scream into pillows, journal the mess without editing. Let the body shiver through buried grief. Talk to someone safe, a therapist, a friend, even a tree. It is all valid. And most importantly, you stop performing okay when you're not. This is what spiritual awakening truly is. The holy act of becoming emotionally honest, becoming available to yourself in your most unfiltered form. And then, gradually, subtly, a shift begins. The heaviness doesn't vanish instantly, but it softens. Your breath feels slightly deeper. Your mornings don't feel as oppressive. You laugh, genuinely laugh, for the first time in what feels like months. That is rebirth. And it is not dramatic. It is not theatrical. It is gentle, unfolding, quietly revolutionary. One day, you awaken and realize you no longer crave the things that distracted you. You no longer need validation from people who never truly saw you. You're not running from life anymore. You're in it fully. And that is when you know you're truly awakening, because enlightenment isn't escape from being human. It is the full embrace of it. With your scars, your softness, your shadow, your sacredness, all included. Carl Jung believed wholeness, not perfection, was the goal. The dark night strips away so you can meet what is whole. And yes, it is brutal. But beyond that brutality is freedom, not the fantasy kind, but the kind where you no longer betray yourself to belong, where you're able to sit with discomfort without abandoning yourself, where your joy isn't manic, but rooted, steady, quietly unshakable. You'll begin noticing the world differently. Colors feel more vivid. Conversations feel more honest. Even silence feels like home now. Because you've met yourself in the dark and you didn't run. That is the real initiation, not avoiding the pain, but walking through it and realizing that who you really are was never the one suffering, the one observing the suffering. That is you. That is the light that was never broken to begin with. So if you're in the thick of it right now, if your world feels like ash and noise, know this, you're not crazy, you're being reborn. And know, it is not glamorous, it is deeply human, and that is what makes it sacred. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment in life that felt like complete collapse? But looking back, you realize it was actually the beginning of something deeper. Share it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you're drawn to content that goes beyond surface level and speaks to the soul, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. This channel exists for the thinkers, the feelers, and those waking, and from here, everything changes. Welcome back to yourself.